Hey, what is going on, guys? It is Non-Reality, and today I'm going to be bringing you a review of every class. Now, this review is going to be for beginners that are new to the game and want to figure out what class they want to use, but this isn't going to be a full breakdown of every single class. If you want that, let me know in the comments, and I can do individual videos for every single class, so a breakdown of like how to play them, what abilities to use, which engravings to use, which gems to use, and all of that. We're just going to go through here and I'm going to give you some quick points on every single class. It might feel a bit repetitive, but I kind of want to stick to a format so you can see what stuff compares to what without having to like cipher through all my words and figure out what's what. So first off, we have Berserker. Now, first off, we're going to start with mobility. This class is very mobile, very fast, and its attack speed is very fast. Damage output, probably one of the highest damage classes in the game if you play it right. Now, all of these are based off of if you play them right. If you have an unoptimal abilities and unoptimal rotation, you won't do as much damage as I think you should. Now, next up is tankiness. If you build this character the way you're supposed to build it, is not a super tanky class. You can do some things to make it more tanky, but that will hurt your damage a bit. Next up, we do have cost. Now, cost for this class is probably one of the highest cost classes because it, like I said, is a super popular class. So it will cost a bit more for accessories, engraving books, gems, etc. Now, next up we have, is it an alt or a main? I think this is a main character. You can play this, or I think this could be a main or an alt. You can play this very easily. It does not take a lot to learn. What base is this? Whether it's a main or an alt, a main would be something that is harder to learn, so you need more time with it, whereas an alt is pretty easy to learn and pretty easy to play. And now next up we do have the stigma of the class. Now, what I mean by stigma is what people think of this class. Will they accept you into parties no matter what? I will say for this class, it is known to die a lot because of the engravings that you do run. So you could find some groups that do not want you in their parties, but most people love when Zerkers are in their parties because they do a ton of damage. Now, next up, we have the Gun Lancer. Mobility is low on this class as it is a tankier class. Its damage output is very decent, actually. Although it is a tank, it can be up there with some of the DPS classes even. Next up, we do have tankiness. Like I said, it is a tank, so it is a very tanky class. A lot of the times you will be sitting on AoE abilities instead of trying to run away with your shields. Now we have cost. I think this class is a pretty average cost. It is like any other kind of support-ish class where people want it, so they're not going to make it insanely expensive, but could get pricey at some points. Now, is this class an alt or a main? I personally think this could be an alt, although if you're going to play this class, you really want to play this class, I'd probably use it as your main because it does take a bit to learn with it being like tanky and figuring out what rotations to use, when to use your shields, and so on and so forth. And then the stigma for this class. The community loves this class. This is the class that everyone will want in their party. If I see a gun lancer, even though I'm a paladin player, if I see a gun lancer in my party finder, I'm going to pick him up no matter what because he just brings so much to the table and he does do decent DPS. Now, next up, we have the Paladin. Now, mobility is pretty high, especially if you build a certain engraving, it does get up even higher. The damage output is very low, as it is a support class. You do not build crit or any sort of damage buff. Tankiness, it is a really tanky class. You can even go an engraving that makes it even more tanky, but you do have a ton of shields and healing, which makes it super tanky. Now, cost, like most supports, the cost is very average, can be on the higher side as there isn't as many supports in the game, so the books and everything and the accessories are more scarce than the DPS classes, but pretty decent overall. Now, alt or main, I personally think if you're going to be playing a support class, you should main it. It can be used as an alt, obviously, but I'd rather have someone who knows how to use a paladin than just some random alt that doesn't even know like how to click his shield personally. But it could be used either way. And then now the stigma of this class, the community loves supports, obviously. Who doesn't? So the stigma is obviously going to be amazing. Unless you build DPS Paladin, then you should burn in a fire. Next up is the Bard. The mobility on this class is just average. It isn't slow, it isn't fast. I think you can build Spirit Absorption on it. I'm not sure as I don't play this class, but it is a pretty decent class overall. Next up, we have damage output. Damage output is low, obviously, since it is a support class, but can do decent damage in Chaos Dungeons and such. Its tankiness is pretty average. I'd say definitely less tanky than a Paladin, but it is pretty good overall. The cost of this class is very similar to the Paladin, as it is a support, and everyone wants one of them, so they're not going to make it super expensive to build. Now, do you want to use this class as an alt or main? Like I said before, I think this class should be a main class because supports can be hard to learn, and I want a good support in my party. I don't want one that just picked up this class and like buffed it with his main and doesn't know how to play the class. And then the stigma of this in this community is it's a great class. Obviously everyone wants a paladin or a bard, and that's all I got to say for that. Now next up is Sorc. Now Sorc does have two way different class engravings that you can go, so the mobility varies based off of what class engravings you go. The damage output on both of these is very, very good. This is probably one of the highest DPS classes, and that's about it for that. Tankiness. The tankiness is low, and if you do build a certain engraving, it does get even lower. Like I said, I'm just saying certain engraving because I don't want to like overload newer players with, hey, you need to build this, you need to build that. Like I said, if you want me to make a video on that, just let me know in the comments below. But its tankiness is all right. Cost of this character is very high, like the Berserker, as it is a very common class to play. The Sorc and the Berserker are the highest, most popular classes to play. So the cost can be a bit pricey for at least the Igniter class engraving. Is this an alt or a main? This can be either or. It could be an alt or a main. I have an alt of this and I play it fine. You don't need any like serious commitment to his class and know how to play it. Obviously there are some tips and tricks that you can get from like maxroll.gg. It does go over like what rotations you can use, and there are some that make you do even more damage. And then the stigma around this class is that it's a really high DPS class, but like I said with the Zerga, it is prone to dying because you do have long cast time animations and you can get stuck in stuff if you do not know the fight. Now next up we have the martial artists. Honestly, I'm gonna put these three kind of in the same category just to get through these pretty fast. The War Dancer, the Scrapper, and the Soulfist, their mobility is all three very high. The damage output is very decent. Right now where we are in NA, it isn't as high as it could be because they do need the later on relic bonuses for the class to succeed. The tankinesses of the class are very, the War Dancer I know is pretty high tankiness because it does have shields, and the Scrapper and Soulfist might have shields. I'm not sure as I don't play these classes, but they're pretty tanky. The cost of the classes are average. They're not low, but they're not high. There isn't as many of these classes in the game, so it could be a bit higher for some things, like if you want a best in slot engraving. But like overall, since the classes aren't super popular, the books and stuff aren't super expensive. Are they alts or mains? I think you could play them either way. Personally, they don't take too long to learn, but I personally wouldn't use them as an alt right now in the game because like I said, they don't excel like some other alt classes could. And then stigma around them, you know, pretty decent classes. I personally don't see a lot of them in Party Finder and stuff, so I can't tell you if people like them or don't like them. But yeah, there's that. Now next up we have the Glaivier. This is the newest class in NA. Mobility very high. It does have certain abilities that you literally just build movement speed on. The damage output right now is okay. I think it will get better later on when people actually learn the class and to get the right engravings, but for now I don't really see Glaiviers doing like top damage. Tankiness of the class, not super tanky. It's very average. If you build like a certain engraving and stuff, it can be even less tanky. So, you know, it's average. The cost right now, the cost is insanely high. Even like not a non-best in slot thing could go for 4,000 gold just because it is a new class. So keep that in mind if you're watching this video as I post it and you want to make one of these classes. Just be wary that the class does cost a bit more. Is this an alt or a main? Like most classes that have double ability bars, I will say you probably want to use this as a main. I personally alt this character, but even from that I know that I'm not the best at this character because I didn't put the time in to learn it. So it can be used as an alt, but more as a main. Now the stigma right now in NA is that everyone's playing this class, so if you get a Lancer in your Party Finder, they're probably not the best because they're just jumping on the bandwagon. But I know in Korea and stuff, it's a pretty okay class overall, and people don't mind having it in their party. Now next up we have the male martial artist, which we only have one, which is the Striker. Mobility insanely high. Damage output is pretty decent. I'd say they don't top DPS, but they don't obviously bottom DPS. Tankiness, not super tanky. It's just a mobility class, and with mobility comes less damage you can take because you should be able to dodge more. The cost of it is okay. It's not great. It can get a bit expensive, like I said, with best in slot, but that just goes with any other class. Is this an alt or a main? It could be used either way, honestly. I personally don't use any martial arts at all, so I can't tell you if people like them as alt or mains because I'm not exactly sure. And then the stigma of this class, there isn't really much to it. Like I said, there's not a lot of people playing this class that I know of, so I can't really give you the community's opinion on that, and I don't want to speak ill of the class if people actually like it. Next up is the sharpshooter. The mobility is very average. The damage output is pretty decent, actually. I don't get many sharpshooters. This is one of the least popular classes in the game. When I do get one in my group, they do a lot of damage, sometimes even top damage. Their tankiness is very average, as it is a long range DPS class. The cost is also very average, since not a lot of people play it. And is it an alt or a main? I personally don't think it matters either way. You can play it as an alt or a main. It's not super hard to play. And then there is no sort of stigma really for this class, because like I said, no one plays it, or at least not a lot of people play it, so no one really has a opinion on it. Next up, we have the Deadeye. This is the male version of the Gunslinger. Its mobility is higher than like the Sharpshooter and Artillerist, but isn't super high. The damage output is pretty decent. You don't really see a lot of these as well. The male gunner overall class in general doesn't really get a lot of love in the community for at least NA. The tankiness of this class is very average. The cost, very average. Can it be an alt or a main? I personally think if you're going to play this class, I'd use it as a main, as it does have like bar switches to 3 different bars, so you got to actually learn how to play it. Can use it as an alt, but you probably won't get the full effect out of it. And then there is no sort of stigma, because like I said, the class isn't very popular, and I haven't really heard anything. Next up, we have the Artillerist. The mobility is lower than average, definitely not super low like the Gunlancer, but is lower than average. The damage output is pretty decent. I don't see many top DPS artillerists, but they are very good to have and very consistent. Their tankiness is higher than average for this the male gunners, because they do have a lot of stationary abilities, so they do get some shields and damage reduction. The cost, very average. Can it be an alt or main? I think either or is fine. It is a pretty easy class to play. And then the stigma around it, not really much of a stigma, although other than, you know, it's okay in tankiness and pretty good DPS class. Next up, we have the Gunslinger, which is the female Deadeye. Its mobility, pretty high. Damage output, actually really high. I really like this class when it's in my party. I think it does really well. Tankiness, not the tankiest class at all. Cost, pretty average. Can it be an alt or main? Like I said with the Deadeye, I think it should be a main, since it does have bar swaps. You actually have to learn how to use it, but can be used as an alt. Stigma, I think this class is very good. There is a stigma behind it of people don't actually know how to build the class, because when you build this class, the class engraving that you use, you only have to get the tier 1 right now, and people get the tier 3 and they kind of like fuck up their build. So the only stigma around there is people don't know how to fucking build this character, but pretty good. Just watch a guide, you'll know how to build it. And the last two, we have Deathblade and Shadowhunter. So the mobility on, I'm just gonna kind of pair these together like I did with the female martial artists, because they are kind of similar. Both the classes, high mobility. Damage output, very average, maybe above average. Tankiness, not the tankiest class. Like I said, depends on how you build it. The cost is very average as well. Alt or main, I think you can use either or. They don't have a lot to them, although obviously you need to know the rotations, but you could go to maxroll.gg, which I can leave in the description, and it will tell you how to build your or how to do your rotations on that class. And then stigma behind it, they're just a very average class. I personally like them. Whenever I see them in my party, I usually pick them up right now, because they do have certain engravings that they run that make them insanely broken, but those are getting nerfed with the next update coming out. And that's basically it for this video. My favorite class, Paladin. If you're gonna build a support, Paladin. But other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you want a video on like specific classes, I can do like complete breakdown and review of the classes. Obviously, some of them like Berserker or Paladin, I can pump those out really quick. But if it was like a martial artist or a gunner, I'd actually have to take the time to learn it and review it. But yeah, if you guys like this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.